December 2nd, 1993, 10:23 a.m. Pablo Escobar talks to his son for exactly 5 minutes and 47 seconds. A father's love, captured in 5 minutes and 47 seconds. And this conversation will cost him everything, because across the city, in a concrete bunker, machines are listening, calculating, triangulating coordinates. The world's most wanted man just signed his own death warrant with a phone call. This is the story of the cocaine king's last day on Earth. An empire built on $400 million a week and the blood of 4,000 souls, brought down by a single conversation. But to understand how one phone call destroyed everything, we need to go back to the beginning, back to when Pablo Escobar was just a poor kid with nothing to lose. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born on December 1st, 1949, in Rio Negro, Colombia. His family moved to Medellín when he was young, settling in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. While other children played in the streets, young Pablo watched his mother struggle to feed the family. His father was a farmer who could barely make ends meet. Pablo learned early that money was power, and he would do anything to get it. As a child, he stole and sold gravestones to local smugglers. By his teenage years, he was stealing cars and selling fake lottery tickets. At age 20, he committed his first serious crime, kidnapping a local executive for ransom. But Pablo wanted more than small-time crime, much more. In the late 1970s, he entered the cocaine trade, and he understood one thing immediately. The math was incredible. 1 kilogram of pure cocaine cost $7,000 to produce in Colombia. Once smuggled into America, it could be cut with lactose to make 3 kilograms. Those 3 kilograms sold for $150,000 on the streets of Miami and New York. This simple math would make him a billionaire. Pablo started small, using mules to carry cocaine in their luggage, but he quickly realized he needed to think bigger, much bigger. He bought his first plane, then another. Then another. Soon, he had a fleet of aircraft flying cocaine directly into the United States. He bribed airport officials, customs agents, and police officers. Anyone who couldn't be bought was eliminated. By the early 1980s, Pablo Escobar was shipping 40 tons of cocaine to America every year. 40 tons. That's 80,000 pounds of pure cocaine flooding into American cities every single year. He controlled 80% of the entire U.S. cocaine market. The money came in so fast, he couldn't count it. He had to weigh it instead. His accountants estimated he was earning $420 million every week. Every single week. The money exceeded the entire economy of some countries. In 1989, Forbes magazine named him one of the 7 richest men in the world. His personal fortune was estimated at $30 billion. $30 billion. From a kid who grew up with nothing. He built 2,000 homes for families living in slums. He constructed entire neighborhoods from nothing. He built hospitals where the poor could get free medical care. He built churches. He built soccer fields where children could play. Every week, he would walk through the poorest neighborhoods, handing out money to families. Poor children in these neighborhoods were named Pablo. Parents taught their kids that Pablo Escobar was a saint. He hired the city's most famous television host to improve his public image. He threw parties where he mixed with politicians, police chiefs, and judges. He made sure everyone knew Pablo Escobar takes care of his people. But there was another side to Pablo, a much darker side. To his enemies, Pablo Escobar was a monster, a ruthless killer who would murder anyone who stood in his way. His philosophy was brutally simple. Plata o plomo, silver or lead. Take the bribe or take the bullet. There was no third option. When judges refused to dismiss cases against him, he had them killed. When journalists wrote negative stories, he had them killed. When politicians opposed him, he had them killed. In 1984, he ordered the assassination of Colombia's Justice Minister, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla. The minister was shot while sitting in his car, reading a newspaper. But Pablo didn't just target individuals. He wanted to send a message to everyone. No one is safe. He distributed thousands of guns to children in the slums. He put bounties on police officers. $2,000 for killing a regular cop. $20,000 for a lieutenant. $50,000 for a police chief. Poor teenagers, desperate to help their families, became assassins overnight. They would ride up on motorcycles, shoot a police officer in broad daylight, and ride away. Hundreds of officers were murdered in the streets. The city of Medellín became a war zone. Bodies piled up in the morgues. Funerals were held every single day. Colombia was bleeding, but Pablo's power kept growing. He had bribed so many officials that he was virtually untouchable. In 1982, he achieved what seemed impossible. He was elected to the Colombian Congress, a drug lord, now a legitimate member of government. Becoming president seemed only a matter of time. He was building a political machine that would make him untouchable. But Pablo made one critical mistake. He underestimated his enemies, and every empire at its peak begins to crumble. Everything changed in 1983. A new justice minister, Luis Carlos Galán, backed by the United States, stood up to Pablo Escobar. In front of television cameras and the entire nation, Galán exposed Pablo's criminal past. He showed arrest photos from Pablo's early crimes. He revealed the drug trafficking empire behind the philanthropist image. Pablo's carefully built political career collapsed in a single day. He was expelled from Congress. Newspapers that once praised him now called him a terrorist. Enraged and humiliated, Pablo struck back. On August 18, 1989, Luis Carlos Galán was assassinated while giving a speech. Shot down in front of thousands of supporters, the murder shocked Colombia and the world. The Colombian government, under intense pressure from the United States, signed an extradition treaty. Any drug trafficker could now be sent to American prisons. For Pablo Escobar, this was a death sentence. He knew that in an American prison, he would have no power, no protection, no control. He would rather die than be extradited. Pablo tried to negotiate. He made an incredible offer to the Colombian government. He would dismantle his entire cartel. He would transfer all foreign drug profits to the Colombian economy. He would even pay off Colombia's entire $12 billion foreign debt. In return, he wanted only two things: legalization of cocaine trafficking and cancellation of the extradition treaty. Secret negotiations took place in Panama. The Colombian government, desperate for money, actually agreed to consider legalizing cocaine, but they refused to cancel the extradition treaty, fearing American retaliation. The negotiations collapsed. Pablo felt betrayed, and when Pablo Escobar felt betrayed, people died. He declared all-out war on the Colombian government. He called it total war, and he meant it. On November 27, 1989, Avianca Flight 203 exploded in midair. 110 innocent people died. The target was a presidential candidate who wasn't even on the plane. Days later, a massive car bomb exploded in downtown Bogotá, outside the DAS intelligence headquarters. The blast killed 52 people and wounded over 1,000. Entire city blocks were destroyed. More bombs followed. Shopping centers, police stations, government buildings. Pablo was bringing Colombia to its knees. The rich and powerful, who had ignored the drug war for years, now felt the terror. Businessmen hired bodyguards. Politicians fled the country. The economy collapsed as foreign investment disappeared. Colombia was descending into total chaos. The government was losing control. Finally, in desperation, President Cesar Gaviria made a deal. If Pablo surrendered, he would not be extradited. He could serve his sentence in Colombia, in a prison of his choosing. On June 19, 1991, Pablo Escobar appeared on national television. He declared a ceasefire. He promised peace. And to prove his sincerity, he would voluntarily surrender to prison. The nation celebrated. The war was finally over, or so they thought. June 19, 1991, a helicopter landed on a hilltop in Envigado, just outside Medellín. Pablo Escobar stepped out, wearing a white shirt and jeans. Cameras captured the moment as he surrendered his weapons and walked into La Catedral prison. But calling La Catedral a prison was a joke. Pablo had designed and built it himself on land he owned. It was more like a private luxury resort. The prison had a soccer field, a bar, a jacuzzi, and a disco. There were gourmet restaurants and comfortable bedrooms. The cells had expensive furniture, big screen televisions, and telephones. Every week, buses brought in beautiful women for parties. His family could visit whenever they wanted. His wife and children came regularly, spending weekends like they were at a vacation home. And most importantly, Pablo still ran his empire from inside. He conducted business meetings in his cell. Drug shipments continued. Money kept flowing in. He even had his accountants bring cash for him to count. The Colombian government had agreed he could have his own security guards, so Pablo's own men guarded the prison. In reality, They kept the government out, not Pablo in. 400 soldiers were stationed around the prison perimeter, but they had orders not to enter. It was the strangest military deployment in history, an army protecting a drug lord from anyone who might try to harm him. For Pablo, life in La Catedral was comfortable. He could see his children grow up. He could watch soccer games. He could enjoy the mountain views, all while continuing to run a billion-dollar criminal empire. But Pablo's enemies hadn't forgotten. Other cartels, especially the Cali cartel, were using his imprisonment to take over his territories. And inside La Catedral, paranoia was growing. One day, his daughter came to visit. Pablo wanted to take her to get ice cream in town. He walked to the gate, expecting it to open as it always did. But this time, when the gate swung open, he saw something that chilled him to his core. U.S. military advisors standing outside with Colombian officers. That's when he realized the truth. The no extradition deal was a trap. The government had agreed not to extradite him, but only because they planned to keep him locked up forever. And the Americans were there to make sure he never escaped. For the first time in his life, Pablo Escobar broke down in tears in front of his daughter. He had put his wife and children in danger. They were his weakness, and his enemies knew it. The paranoia grew worse. Pablo suspected everyone of betrayal. In July 1992, two of his former partners came to La Catedral for a meeting. They owed Pablo $250,000 from a cocaine shipment, but they only brought $50,000, claiming unexpected expenses. Pablo listened to their excuses. Then he calmly ordered his men to kill them both, right there in the prison. They were tortured first, then shot. When news of the murders reached Bogota, the government finally had an excuse to act. President Gaviria ordered Pablo transferred to a real military prison. On July 22nd, 1992, 400 soldiers surrounded La Catedral. Armored vehicles and helicopters moved in. This time, they were coming to take him by force. But when the soldiers finally entered, Pablo Escobar was gone. He had simply walked out through a back entrance. The electric gate controls were in his own bedroom. After all, it was his prison. In the chaos and fog, Pablo and his bodyguards disappeared into the mountains, the greatest prison escape in modern history. The escape from La Catedral humiliated the Colombian government. Now, with American help, they launched the most expensive manhunt in history. A special unit called the Search Block was formed. 600 elite soldiers, backed by the CIA, DEA, and Delta Force. Their mission was simple: find Pablo Escobar and kill him. They had unlimited funding and access to technology that officially didn't exist. Phone tracking equipment that could pinpoint any call in Colombia in real time. Surveillance aircraft, informant networks. But Pablo had something just as powerful: the loyalty of Medellín's poor. In the slums, everyone protected him. When Search Block arrived, someone would tip off Pablo, and he'd be gone. For 16 months, the most famous criminal in the world lived like a rat. He moved from safe house to safe house, sleeping in basements, attics, storage rooms, never more than 2 nights in the same place. The man who once owned 7 planes and counted money with industrial scales now carried his entire life in a duffel bag. He couldn't see his family. He couldn't go outside during the day. He watched his own funeral on television. His enemies had spread rumors he was dead. Meanwhile, his empire was collapsing. The rival Cali cartel, working with the DEA and CIA-backed paramilitaries, was taking over all his territories. One by one, his organization fell apart. His lawyers were killed. His accountants were arrested. His hitmen were hunted down. Anyone associated with Pablo Escobar became a target. But Pablo couldn't fight back, because his family was his weakness. His wife, Maria Victoria, and children Juan Pablo and Manuela were hiding in hotels, moving every few days. The Search Block was closing in on them too. Pablo decided they had to escape Colombia. He arranged a flight to Germany, where they would seek asylum. But Pablo's mistress, television host Virginia Vallejo, had cracked under DEA pressure. She gave them everything: safe house locations, contact methods, his daily routines. No one knew Pablo better than Virginia. When his family's plane landed in Germany, customs officials were waiting. On orders from the DEA, his wife and children were detained and placed under house arrest in a luxury hotel in Bogota. In the room next door, the Colombian military and American agents set up a complete surveillance post. Cameras, recording equipment, phone taps. They hoped to use his family as bait to catch Pablo. When Pablo saw the news on television, his greatest fear had come true. His family was completely exposed, and he was powerless to protect them. He knew calling them was dangerous. He knew every phone line was monitored. His own men begged him not to do it. But Pablo Escobar couldn't help himself. He had to hear their voices. He had to know they were okay. For 16 months, Pablo had followed one iron rule: never stay on the phone longer than 2 minutes. Any longer, and they could triangulate his location. But on December 2nd, 1993, at exactly 10:23 a.m., Pablo picked up the phone and called his son. The call lasted 5 minutes and 47 seconds. Across Medellín, in a concrete bunker, computers tracked the signal. Within minutes, Search Block had his location: Los Olivos neighborhood. 400 soldiers mobilized. Helicopters took off. Snipers took positions on rooftops. At 2:04 p.m., Pablo looked out the window and saw tactical teams surrounding the house. He grabbed his pistol. His bodyguard grabbed an AK-47. The shootout lasted 6 minutes. Over 200 rounds fired. Then Pablo tried to escape across the rooftops, just like he had done dozens of times before. But this time, there was nowhere to run. At 3:15 p.m., on a clay tile rooftop, Pablo Escobar was shot dead. It was his 44th birthday. He was 44 years old. From a rooftop across the street, someone shouted, "Long live Colombia!" The crowd erupted in cheers. Church bells rang. People danced in the streets. The most wanted man in the world was finally dead. In that final phone call, Pablo chose love over survival. Maybe that makes him human. Maybe that makes him a father. Or maybe it just makes him dead. Pablo Escobar was many things: monster, hero, father, terrorist. His death ended the Medellín cartel. But not the drug war. Other cartels filled the void. The violence continued. The cocaine kept flowing. Maybe that's his real legacy. Not the empire he built, but the war that outlasted him.